All right, let's get right into it. We're going back to a dark, quiet night in 1963 when a pretty ordinary Royal Mail train, well, it became the stage for what would go down in history as the crime of the century.
I mean, it sounds like a riddle, right? But this was the simple and honestly brilliant trick that kicked off a heist so bold, so carefully planned that we're still talking about it all these decades later.
So it's 3 in the morning at Sears Crossing. For the train driver, a guy named Jack Mills, seeing a red light right here, that wasn't just weird, it was impossible. This route was always clear for the mail train. So he does what he has to do, he stops the train, and suddenly everything goes quiet. A really eerie silence. That was about to be shattered.
Okay, so the assistant driver, he hops out to use the line-side telephone to call the signalman. Standard procedure. But nothing. The line's completely dead. It had been cut. And that was the first chilling clue that something was very, very wrong here. And before the crew could even really react, the gang was on them. They swarmed the engine from both sides. It was fast, it was brutal, and they didn't fire a single shot. The driver, Jack Mills, was knocked out cold with an iron bar. Just like that, they had control.
So, how in the world did they get to this point? I mean, this was no random attack. Nope, this was the result of months and months of careful, meticulous planning. And it all started with a secret tip.
You see, the entire operation, the whole shebang, it all hinged on information from one person. A mysterious insider, someone high up in the Royal Mail. And get this, his identity is still one of the biggest secrets of the whole affair.
Okay, so his first tip was a total game changer. He told the gang that the normal high-security carriage, the one with all the bells and whistles, was out of service that night. Instead, they'd be using a reserve carriage, M3024M. And the most important part? It had absolutely no alarm system. None. And then came tip number 2, which just shows how perfect their timing was. Because of a bank holiday weekend, the train wasn't just carrying a lot of cash, it was carrying nearly 12 times the usual amount, over 2.5 million pounds. This was the score of a lifetime, and they knew it.
So, the mastermind behind all this, a guy named Bruce Reynolds, he knew his crew was good, but they were missing one key piece of experience. They'd never actually robbed a train before. So what does he do? He joins forces with another gang, the South Coast Raiders, who had done exactly that. He basically created a 15-man criminal super team for this one job.
All right, so let's jump back to the railway tracks. The crew is tied up, the gang is in control, but then their perfect plan hits its first big problem.
See, they brought their own getaway driver for the train, a retired guy. But he takes one look at the controls of this modern engine and he's totally lost. He can't operate it. So in this crazy high-stakes moment, they have to wake up the guy they just knocked out, Jack Mills, and force him to drive the train that last kilometer to their ambush spot.
Once they got to Bridego Bridge, it was pure, violent efficiency. They stormed the high-value carriage, subdued the 5 staff members inside, and formed this human chain to unload 2.5 tons of cash, bag after bag, down to a waiting truck. They gave themselves 15 minutes to do it, and by 3:40 a.m., they were gone.
So the gang just melts into the night. They drive 43 kilometers to a farmhouse hideout they'd set up. They must have been thinking, we did it, we pulled off the perfect crime. But they were wrong. In those last few moments on the train, one of them made a huge mistake.
Just as they were leaving, one of the robbers turned to the postal workers they tied up and said, "Don't try to get up for 30 minutes. He probably thought he was just scaring them, making sure they got away clean. But what he'd actually done was hand the police their very first clue.
Think about it. That one little warning was their undoing. The police hear this and they immediately do the math. If the gang is warning them not to move for 30 minutes, their hideout has to be within a 30-minute drive. Boom. Just like that, the massive search area shrinks down to a 50-kilometer radius.
Meanwhile, back at the farmhouse, the gang is probably starting to celebrate. But they're also listening to a police radio scanner, and their hearts must have dropped when they heard the dispatch go out telling officers to focus the search in a 50-kilometer circle around the bridge. They knew. The net was already closing in around them.
And just like that, panic. The original plan to lay low for a few days, totally out the window. They decide to scatter, right then and there. They frantically wipe the whole place down for fingerprints, and they pay one guy to burn the farmhouse to the ground to destroy any evidence, a job he took the money for but never actually did.
Now, with a massive 10,000 reward on the table, it didn't take long for a local to call in. They reported some suspicious activity at a nearby place, Leatherslade Farm, and that one tip, it led police right to the front door of the gang's hideout.
Now, to be fair, the gang did a pretty good job cleaning up. They wiped down bottles, doorknobs, all the surfaces. But in that small window of time between pulling off the heist and realizing the cops were onto them, they had a little celebration, and they forgot to clean up after their party.
And what was the one thing they missed? A Monopoly board. You can't make this up. To celebrate their massive haul of cash, they sat around playing Monopoly, using the real stolen money. And their fingerprints were left all over that game board, the little hotels, the cards. Since most of them had criminal records, it was as good as leaving behind a signed confession.
That Monopoly board was the key that unlocked the whole case. Scotland Yard got the prints, ran them through their system, and bam, they started getting matches. One by one, the gang members were arrested. The saga of the perfect crime came to a surprisingly simple end for most of them.
So when the dust settled, 14 members of the gang were caught and handed these massive 30-year prison sentences. But here's the thing, 2 of them were never identified. The guy they brought to drive the train, and of course the mysterious insider who fed them the information in the first place. They just vanished.
You know, the legacy of this robbery is still felt today. The bridge where it happened is still called Train Robbers Bridge by people who live there. But the real tragic legacy is what happened to Jack Mills, the driver. He never worked again, and he never really recovered from the trauma of that night. He died just 7 years later.
So, the perfect crime needs the perfect criminal, right? But what happens when the biggest clue you leave behind is the game you played to celebrate? It just goes to show you can plan a multi-million-pound heist with near military precision, but it's the smallest human things, one careless sentence, a board game, that can bring the whole thing crashing down.